The Chinook's rotors thundered overhead, kicking up swirls of dust as it descended toward the makeshift landing zone. The squad of U.S. soldiers, 10 men in total, ducked low, gripping their gear as they prepared to disembark into the heart of the Korengal Valley. "Welcome to paradise, gentlemen," Corporal Diaz muttered, adjusting his helmet as the ramp lowered. His voice was dry, but the unease beneath his bravado was unmistakable. Sergeant Cole was the first to step off, boots sinking into the dry earth. The valley stretched before them, jagged cliffs, dense foliage, and an eerie silence that pressed against his ears like a weight. The air was thick, humid, but it wasn't just the heat that made his skin prickle. "Place looks like a damn postcard," Private Jenkins said, shouldering his pack. "If postcards came with a side of Taliban." A few of the men chuckled, but the sound died quickly. There was no echo here, no bird song, no rustle of wind through the trees. Just stillness. Cole scanned the ridge lines, his instincts humming. Shadows flickered along the cliffs too fast, too fluid to be natural. He squinted, but whatever he'd seen was gone. "Keep your eyes open," he said, voice low. "Something's off." The men exchanged glances but didn't question it. They'd learned to trust Cole's gut. The outpost was little more than a cluster of sandbag bunkers and a few tents, hastily erected by the unit they were relieving. The previous squad had looked hollow-eyed when they'd boarded the chopper out, like men who'd seen too much. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the valley swallowed the light whole. Darkness came fast, and with it, the whispers began not from the men, but from the land itself. A low, almost inaudible hum beneath the earth. Cole lit a cigarette, the flare of his lighter cutting through the gloom. He exhaled slowly, watching the smoke curl into the night. Tomorrow, they'd start patrols. Tomorrow, they'd learn what this valley was hiding. But for now, the shadows watched and waited. The night pressed in like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Private Jenkins shifted his weight, the stock of his M4 resting against his shoulder as he scanned the perimeter. The outpost was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual hum of insects was absent, leaving only the occasional rustle of wind through the valley's skeletal trees. 2 more hours, he thought, glancing at his watch. The glow of the dial was the only light for miles. His eyes drifted to the ridgeline, a jagged silhouette against the starless sky. Then he saw it. A figure, robed, motionless, standing just beyond the tree line. Its outline was too sharp, too still, like a statue carved from the darkness itself. Jenkins' breath hitched. He blinked once, twice, but the figure didn't waver. "Hey," he whispered, nudging Diaz, who was slumped against the sandbags, half asleep. "You see that?" Diaz grunted, squinting into the black. "See what?" Jenkins turned back. The ridge was empty. "Nothing," he muttered, shaking his head, "just tired." But the dread didn't leave. It coiled in his gut, cold and heavy. He'd seen it. He knew he had. The wind picked up, carrying a whisper, not a sound, but a feeling, like fingers brushing the back of his neck. Jenkins tightened his grip on his rifle. Out there, in the dark, something was watching. And it wasn't human. The fire had burned low, leaving only embers to cast flickering shadows across the men's faces. Sergeant Cole sat with his back against a sandbag, his rifle across his lap. The squad had taken to rotating shifts around the fire, not just for warmth but for the illusion of safety it offered. Corporal Reyes was the first to break the silence. "You hear that?" he murmured, his voice barely audible over the crackle of dying flames. Cole frowned. "Hear what?" Reyes tilted his head, his dark eyes scanning the tree line. Voices. Faint, like whispering. The men stilled, listening, At first, there was nothing, just the oppressive silence of the valley. Then, like a trickle of water through cracks in stone, it came. A whisper. Then another. Pashto. English. Fragments of words, half-formed sentences, slipping through the dark like ghosts. They are here. Do not look. Private Jenkins exhaled sharply. What on earth is that? Diaz shifted, his fingers tightening around his rifle. Could be locals. Maybe Taliban trying to mess with us. Cole shook his head. No way they'd get this close without us hearing them move. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from every direction at once. Some spoke in urgent, guttural tones, others in slow, deliberate English, as if savoring each word. Then Reyes stiffened. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. Eyes, he hissed, in the trees glowing. Every head turned. Between the gnarled branches, faint pinpricks of light flickered gold, then red, then gold again. They didn't move like reflections. They pulsed, like embers breathed to life. Jenkins' throat went dry. Those aren't. A branch snapped. The whispers cut off. The eyes vanished. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire spat a final spark, then surrendered to the dark. Cole stood, his muscles taut. We're doubling the watch. 2 men on perimeter, at all times. No one sleeps alone. No one argued. As the squad dispersed, Reyes lingered, his gaze locked on the trees. You felt it too, didn't you? He muttered to Cole. Cole didn't answer, but the weight in his chest, the unshakable certainty that something ancient and hungry had just brushed against them, was answer enough. The valley had spoken, and tonight it learned their names. The morning sun did little to dispel the unease clinging to the squad like a second skin. Sergeant Cole tightened the strap of his helmet, his eyes scanning the narrow trail ahead. The patrol was supposed to be routine, a sweep of the eastern ridge to scout for insurgent activity. But nothing in the Coringal Valley was ever routine. Stay sharp, Cole muttered, his voice barely carrying over the crunch of boots on dry earth. No surprises. Private Harris, the youngest in the squad, adjusted his grip on his rifle. His knuckles were white. You think we'll see more of those things? Diaz shot him a warning look. Eyes forward, kid. Don't give the shadows ideas. The trail wound upward, the cliffs looming like sentinels on either side. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic, like old blood. Jenkins kept glancing over his shoulder, his jaw clenched. Then the laughter started. It echoed from the cliffs above them, high, mocking, a sound that skittered down Cole's spine like ice. Not human. Not right. Contact. Reyes barked, swinging his rifle toward the rocks. The squad dropped into defensive positions, barrels trained on the ridges, but there was nothing to shoot at. No movement. No figures. Just the laughter, taunting them from the unseen. Then the world exploded. Dirt and rock showered down as something detonated beneath them. Not an IED. No shrapnel. Just force, raw and unnatural, throwing men off their feet. Cole hit the ground hard, his ears ringing. Harris. Jenkins shouted, scrambling up. Where's Harris? Nah. Cole's stomach dropped. The kid was gone. No body. No blood. Just an empty patch of dirt where he'd been standing seconds before. Fan out. Cole roared. Find him. The squad moved in pairs, weapons raised, but the valley had gone eerily silent again. No laughter. No whispers, just the oppressive weight of being watched. They found Harris 10 minutes later, curled in a shallow gully. His rifle lay discarded beside him, his hands clawed into the dirt. His eyes were wide, unblinking, pupils blown so large they swallowed the irises whole. Harris. Cole grabbed his shoulders. "Talk to me, Private." Harris's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like his own, too deep, too guttural, he rasped, "The Watcher sees you." A chill spider walked down Cole's spine. Around him, the men exchanged glances, their faces pale. Jenkins swallowed hard. What on earth is a Watcher? Harris's head lolled back, his body going slack. His mouth stretched into a smile too wide, too many teeth. And then he screamed. The sound tore through the valley, raw and endless, as if something inside him had been waiting to get out. Cole didn't hesitate. Fall back. Now. The squad moved as one, dragging Harris between them, his screams fading into ragged whimpers. Behind them, the cliffs seemed to lean in, the shadows deepening, stretching like grasping fingers. They didn't stop running until the outpost was in sight. Harris was catatonic by the time they reached the sandbags, his lips still moving, whispering the same phrase over and over. "The Watcher sees you. The Watcher sees you." Cole lit a cigarette with shaking hands, his gaze locked on the ridgeline. The valley had taken its first toll, and whatever was out there was just getting started. The medevac chopper roared overhead, its blades slicing through the heavy air as it descended toward the outpost. Harris lay motionless on the stretcher, his eyes still wide and unseeing, lips still forming those same whispered words. "The Watcher sees you." Sergeant Cole watched as the medics loaded him into the bird, his jaw tight. He'd seen men break before shell shock, PTSD, the slow unraveling of war, but this was different. Harris hadn't just snapped. Something had taken something from him. The chopper lifted off, kicking up dust as it banked toward Bagram. Cole turned to Corporal Diaz. "Make sure his report gets flagged. I want psych eval and full debrief on record." Diaz nodded, but his expression was grim. "You really think they'll believe us?" Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Co's tent was stifling, the canvas walls trapping the heat like a sauna. Captain Vickers sat behind a folding table, his fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. "Sergeant Cole," he said, voice flat, "you requested this meeting." Cole stood at attention, though every muscle in his body screamed apace. "Sir, Private Harris's condition wasn't just combat stress. Something happened out there. Something we can't explain." Vickers sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've read your preliminary report, Sergeant. Hallucinations. Voices. A missing man who reappeared changed." He lifted his gaze, his eyes sharp. "You expect me to forward this to command?" Cole's fists clenched. "I expect you to listen, sir. Harris wasn't the first to see things. The entire squad's reporting anomalies. Bad." And yet Vickers interrupted. "No one else has been affected like Harris. No physical injuries. No enemy contact. Just stories." He leaned forward. "You're a good soldier, Cole. But if I send this up the chain, they'll pull your whole unit for psych review. Is that what you want?" The unspoken threat hung in the air. Cole exhaled through his nose. "No, sir." Vickers nodded, satisfied. "Then we're done here. Dismissed." Night fell like a shroud. Jenkins took the first watch, his back against the sandbags, his rifle across his lap. The valley was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had stilled, leaving the air thick and stagnant, Then he saw it. The robed figure stood at the edge of the tree line, closer than before. Moonlight glinted off something beneath the hood, not a face, but a smooth, featureless surface, like polished stone. Jenkins' breath caught. His finger hovered over the trigger. Move. Just move. Give me a reason. The figure tilted its head. A whisper slithered through the dark, not from the trees, but from inside Jenkins' own skull. You are seen. His blood turned to ice. He blinked. He blinked. And the figure was gone. But the words lingered, echoing in the hollows of his mind. Jenkins didn't sleep that night. And he didn't tell the others. Some truths were too dangerous to share. The sun was a dull smear behind the clouds as Reyes knelt beside the collapsed bunker, his fingers brushing the torn canvas of an old supply bag. The squad had spent the morning reinforcing the outpost's perimeter, but his attention had snagged on the debris pile near the eastern trench remnants of the unit they'd replaced. Something glinted in the dirt. Reyes dug it out, wiping the grime away with his sleeve. A leather-bound journal, its edges frayed and water-stained. The cover bore no name, only a smudged serial number barely legible beneath layers of dust. He flipped it open. The first few pages were mundane log entries, duty rosters, the occasional sketch of the valley's terrain. But halfway through, the tone shifted. Heard the whispers again last night. Diaz, not our Diaz, the other one, swears it's just the wind, but I know what I heard. Something's out there, watching. Reyes' pulse quickened. He turned the page. Jenkins, different squad, same name, weird, right? Saw the figure on the ridge. Hooded. No face. Command says it's Taliban in robes, but Jenkins swears it wasn't human. He won't sleep anymore. A chill prickled Reyes' neck. He scanned ahead, his eyes snagging on a frantic, ink-blotted entry near the end. They're not Taliban. They're not even illegible scribble. Saw it move. No legs. Just gliding. Harris, not ours, is gone. Not dead. Gone. The watcher took him. It's not Taliban. It's not Taliban. The final words were gouged into the paper, as if the writer had pressed down hard enough to tear the page. Reyes snapped the journal shut, his breath shallow. He glanced around, half expecting to see the hooded figure looming behind him. But the outpost was quiet, the rest of the squad busy with repairs. Only Diaz noticed his stillness. You look like you've seen a ghost, Diaz said, nudging his boot against Reyes' leg. Reyes hesitated, then held out the journal. Found this. Belonged to the last unit. Diaz took it, flipping through with a frown, his expression darkened by the second. When he reached the final entry, his jaw tightened. Yeah, they stood in silence, the weight of the journal pressing between them. We should show Cole, Diaz muttered. Reyes shook his head. And say what? That the guys before us went nuts too. Command already thinks we're seeing things. Diaz thumbed the journal's edge, his gaze distant. You think it's real? Not just stress or some messed up group hallucination. Reyes thought of the whispers, the eyes in the trees, Harris's hollowed out voice. He thought of the way the shadows moved when no one was looking. I think, he said slowly, we're not the first ones to notice. And I think the ones who didn't make it out sane. Diaz exhaled sharply, then shoved the journal into his vest. We keep this between us. For now. Reyes nodded, but the words from the journal echoed in his skull like a warning. It's not Taliban. And if it wasn't the enemy they'd been trained to fight. What was it? The gunfire erupted without warning. Bullets tore through the trees, sending splinters flying as the squad hit the dirt. Taliban fighters had ambushed them from the ridge, their muzzle flashes flickering like fireflies in the fading light. Contact left. Cole barked, returning fire. The squad fanned out, rifles barking in unison as they laid down suppressing fire. Jenkins pressed himself behind a boulder, his heart hammering against his ribs. Diaz cursed beside him, ejecting a spent magazine. They've got us pinned. Jenkins risked a glance over the rock, just in time to see a grenade arc toward them. Grenade. They dove as the explosion rocked the earth, dirt and debris raining down. Jenkins' ears rang, his vision swimming. He blinked, shaking his head to clear the haze. And then he saw it. The Watcher. It stood in the middle of the kill zone, untouched, unhurried. Bullets passed through it like smoke, leaving no mark on its ragged robes. The hooded face turned slowly, deliberately, toward Jenkins. A cold fist closed around his lungs. Jenkins, move. Diaz yanked him back as a burst of gunfire chewed into the rock where his head had been. Jenkins barely registered it. His eyes stayed locked on the figure. It tilted its head. Then, in a movement too smooth to be human, it stepped backward into the shadow of a tree and vanished. The firefight raged on, but Jenkins couldn't tear his gaze from the spot where it had been. Jenkins. Cole's voice snapped him back, eyes on the damn fight. Jenkins swallowed hard, forcing himself to raise his rifle. The Taliban were falling back, their shots growing sporadic as the squad pushed forward. But Jenkins knew. They hadn't been the real threat. Back at the outpost, the squad regrouped, checking gear and patching minor wounds. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a brittle silence. Diaz nudged Jenkins' shoulder. You okay, man? You checked out hard back there. Jenkins opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? I saw the thing from my nightmares standing in the middle of a firefight, and no one else noticed. Yeah, he muttered. Just thought I saw something. Diaz studied him, then nodded slowly. This place'll do that to you. But Jenkins knew it wasn't the place. It was the thing in it. The thing that had looked right at him. And now, somehow, he was certain. It knew his name. The radio crackled to life just after midnight. Corporal Diaz adjusted the dial, his brow furrowing as static hissed through the speaker. The outpost's comms had been spotty since their arrival, but tonight the interference was worse, thick, distorted, like the valley itself was choking the signal. Bravo 7. This is Outpost Kilo. Do you copy? Diaz repeated, gripping the handset. No response. Just the endless white noise. Then a voice. Not the clipped tones of command, not the garbled pashto of local chatter. This was something else. You are being watched. Diaz froze. The words were clear, deliberate, but the voice was wrong, too deep, too layered, as if multiple throats were speaking in unison. Say again, Diaz demanded, his fingers tightening around the handset. The static swelled, swallowing the voice for a moment before it returned, louder this time. You are being watched. Jenkins, who had been dozing against the sandbags nearby, jerked upright. Diaz didn't answer. He twisted the dial again, but the voice only grew clearer, more insistent. You are being watched. Then, beneath it, another whisper, faint but unmistakable. Jenkins went pale. Did it just? Diaz slammed the radio off. The sudden silence was deafening. Across the outpost, Reyes looked up from cleaning his rifle. Problem? Diaz exhaled sharply. Just interference. Probably some jackass Taliban screwing with the frequencies. Jenkins didn't look convinced. His hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette. Since when do Taliban know our names? Diaz shot him a warning glance. Drop it. But the damage was done. The words lingered in the air between them, heavy as a threat. Cole found Diaz by the radio an hour later, disassembling the unit with a screwdriver. Breaking Army property now, Corporal? Cole said dryly. Nee. Diaz didn't look up. Just checking the wiring. Signal's been garbage all night. Cole leaned against the sandbags, watching him. Heard you had some chatter earlier. Diaz's hand stilled for a fraction of a second before he resumed his work. Just static. Probably atmospheric. Cole studied him. Diaz was a good liar, had to be, in their line of work, but Cole had known him long enough to spot the tells. The tightness in his jaw. The way his eyes flicked toward the tree line, just for a second. Right, Cole said slowly. Well, if the static says anything interesting, let me know. Diaz met his gaze then, and the unspoken understanding passed between them. Something's wrong, and we're not talking about it. The radio stayed off for the rest of the night. But just before dawn, as Jenkins took the last watch, the speaker crackled to life on its own. No one was touching it. The voice returned, softer this time, almost mournful. You are being watched. Jenkins stared at the radio, his blood turning to ice. Then, so quiet he almost missed it. We see you all. The transmission cut out. The valley held its breath. And for the first time, Jenkins wondered if whatever was out there could speak through the radio. What else could it do? The firefight had been brief but brutal. 2 Taliban fighters lay motionless in the dirt just beyond the outpost's perimeter, their bodies riddled with bullets. The squad had taken no casualties, just Diaz with a graze on his arm and Reyes with a bruised rib from diving behind cover too hard. Sergeant Cole exhaled through his nose, rolling his stiff shoulders. Jenkins, Reyes, bag him and tag him. We'll call in the retrieval team at first light. The 2 soldiers moved forward, gloves on, their faces set in grim masks. No one liked handling the dead, but it was part of the job. Jenkins crouched beside the first body, rolling it onto its back. The man's eyes were still open, glassy in the moonlight. Think they were alone, Reyes muttered, reaching for the second body. Jenkins glanced at the dark tree line. Doubt it. They worked in silence, securing the corpses for transport. The rest of the squad kept watch, rifles trained on the shadows. The valley was quiet, unnaturally so. Even the usual hum of insects had gone silent, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Diaz lit a cigarette, the flare of his lighter cutting through the gloom. Place gives me the creeps. And Cole didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the ridge, where the moonlight painted the rocks silver. He could have sworn something moved up there, something too tall, too still, to be human. But when he blinked, there was nothing. Morning came gray and heavy, the sun smothered by thick clouds. Cole rubbed his eyes as he stepped out of the command tent, squinting against the dull light. The retrieval team was due any minute. He scanned the perimeter, then froze. The bodies were gone. Not moved, not dragged away. Gone. The ground where they'd lain was undisturbed, no bloodstains, no drag marks, no sign they'd ever been there at all. Cole's pulse spiked. Diaz. The corporal appeared a second later, his expression tightening as he followed Cole's gaze. What on earth? Meh. The rest of the squad gathered, their murmurs rising in pitch. Maybe animals? Jenkins offered, though his voice lacked conviction. Reyes shook his head. Animals leave traces. This is clean. Too clean. Cole's jaw clenched. He turned on his heel and marched toward the command tent. Captain Vickers barely looked up from his paperwork as Cole entered. Sergeant. Met. Sir, we have a situation. Cole kept his voice level, though every muscle in his body was coiled tight. 2 enemy Kia from last night's engagement have disappeared. No signs of scavengers or insurgent activity. Vickers sighed, setting down his pen. Taliban recover their dead all the time. Sergeant, you know this. Ace. Cole leaned forward, planting his palms on the desk. Not like this. There's no trace, sir. No tracks, no blood, nothing. It's like they vanished into thin air. Vickers studied him for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. You're suggesting what, exactly? That ghosts took them? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Cole straightened. I'm suggesting something's not right in this valley, sir. My men have seen things. Things. Vickers cut him off, his voice sharp. You mean the whispers? The shadows? The figures? He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the plywood floor. I've read your reports, Cole. Half your squad's jumping at their own shadows. Now you're telling me the dead are walking off. Cole held his ground. I'm telling you something's happening here that we don't understand. Vickers exhaled through his nose, his expression softening slightly. Look, I get it. This place wears on a man. But you start spreading stories like this, and command's gonna think you've lost it. You want that for your men? For yourself? The unspoken threat was clear. Cole clenched his fists. No, sir. Then we're done here. Vickers sat back down, picking up his pen. Taliban took their dead. End of story. Cole turned on his heel and left, the tent flap snapping shut behind him. The squad was waiting for him outside, their faces taut with unspoken questions. Diaz was the first to speak. Well? Cole lit a cigarette, taking a long drag before answering. Officially? Taliban recovered their dead. Jenkins scoffed. Yeah, Cole exhaled smoke, watching it curl into the heavy air. But that's the story we're sticking to. Reyes crossed his arms. And unofficially? Cole met their eyes one by one, his voice dropping to a whisper. Unofficially? We watch each other's backs. No one goes alone. No one sleeps alone. The men exchanged glances, but no one argued. Diaz nodded toward the tree line, his expression grim. You think it'll come for us next? Cole followed his gaze. The shadows between the trees seemed deeper now, thicker, as if something was pressing against them from the other side. I think, he said quietly, it's already here. And in the silence that followed, the valley seemed to listen. Cole's sleep was a black ocean, heavy and suffocating. At first, there was nothing, just the void of exhaustion pressing down on him. Then, slowly, the dream took shape. He stood in the valley, but it was wrong. The cliffs were too tall, their edges sharp as broken glass. The sky was a sickly purple, pulsing like a bruise, and the air thick, syrupy, clung to his skin like oil. A whisper slithered past his ear. You are seen. Cole turned, his rifle rising on instinct, but there was nothing behind him. Just the valley, stretching endlessly in every direction. Then the ground trembled. A shadow detached itself from the cliff's tall, robed, its form shifting like smoke. The Watcher. Matt. Its hooded face tilted toward him. Beneath the fabric, there was no skin, no features. Just darkness. a yawning void that made Cole's stomach twist. It took a step forward. Cole's finger tightened on the trigger, but his arms wouldn't move. His muscles were locked, frozen, as if the dream itself held him in place. The watcher glided closer, its robes whispering against the dirt. "You are known." Known. The voice wasn't sound. It was vibration, crawling up Cole's spine like insects. No, he shouldn't understand it. The words weren't English, weren't Pashto, weren't any language spoken by men. And yet, he did. The watcher raised a hand too long, too many joints, and pointed at Cole's chest. "You are marked." Cole's breath hitched. His dog tags burned against his skin, searing like brands. He tried to shout, to fight, but his throat was sealed shut. The watcher leaned in, its hood brushing his forehead. And then it spoke a single word. A name. His name. Not Cole. Not his rank. The other name. The one he hadn't heard since he was a child. The one no one in this valley could possibly know. Cole woke screaming. The tent was ice cold, his breath fogging in the air despite the Afghan heat. His hands shook as he fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark. Empty. Just his cot, his gear, the faint hum of the generator outside. Then the light caught the canvas wall beside his cot. 3 long, jagged grooves tore through the fabric, starting at head height and ending near the ground. Claw marks, deep enough to let in thin slivers of moonlight. Cole's blood turned to ice. He hadn't imagined it. The watcher had been here, in his tent, while he slept. Diaz was on watch when Cole stumbled out, his face pale, his eyes wild. "Jesus, Sarge," Diaz muttered, lowering his rifle. "You look scared." Cole grabbed his arm, his grip bruising. "Did you see anything? Anyone near my tent?" Diaz frowned. "No, why?" Cole exhaled sharply, releasing him. "Nothing. Just a dream." Diaz studied him, then nodded toward the tree line. "You hear the whispers too?" Cole followed his gaze. The trees stood silent, their branches still, but the air between them shimmered, just for a second, like heat off asphalt. "Yeah," Cole muttered. "Something like that." Diaz lit a cigarette, offering it to him. Cole took it, the smoke searing his lungs, grounding him. The claw marks on his tent said enough. The watcher wasn't just watching anymore. It was reaching out, and Cole had the sickening feeling it was only a matter of time before it grabbed hold. The chopper arrived at dawn, its rotors kicking up a storm of dust that stung Cole's eyes. He shielded his face, watching as a lone officer in pressed fatigue stepped onto the hard-packed earth. The man carried himself with the stiff precision of command, but there was something off about him. His eyes were too sharp, his movements too deliberate, like a predator assessing prey. "Sergeant Cole," the officer said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, cold. "Captain Ellis, I'll be taking over the investigation into your recent incidents." Cole's jaw tightened. "What investigation, sir? We haven't filed anything beyond standard engagement reports." Ellis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Exactly." He strode past Cole toward the command tent, leaving the squad to exchange uneasy glances. Diaz flicked his cigarette into the dirt, his voice low. "That guy's trouble." Jenkins shifted his weight. "What's he investigating? The missing bodies? The whispers?" Reyes said nothing. His hand drifted to his vest, where the journal was hidden. The meeting was short. Ellis emerged from the tent 10 minutes later, Captain Vickers trailing behind him like a shadow. The squad watched as Ellis made a beeline for Reyes. "Corporal," Ellis said, his voice smooth, "I understand you've come into possession of some unauthorized material." Reyes stiffened. "Sir," Ellis held out his hand, "the journal." "Yeah." A beat of silence. Reyes' fingers twitched toward his vest, but Cole stepped forward. "With all due respect, Captain, that journal was found on base. It's not classified." Ellis's gaze slid to Cole, his expression unreadable. "Everything in this valley is classified, Sergeant." His hand didn't waver. "The journal, now." Reyes hesitated, then pulled the leather-bound book from his vest and handed it over. Ellis flipped through it, his lips thinning as he scanned the entries. Then, without a word, he slipped it into his own pocket. "Let me make something clear," Ellis said, addressing the squad. "This outpost is a critical strategic position. The last thing we need is wild rumors spreading among the ranks. You've seen combat stress before sleep deprivation, paranoia, auditory hallucinations. It happens." His gaze lingered on Cole. "But if I hear one more word about watchers or whispers in the dark, I'll have every last one of you shipped home for psych eval. Understood?" The squad nodded mutely. Ellis turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Sergeant?" Cole met his eyes. "Sir, burn the rest." Ellis strode back to the chopper, his silhouette sharp against the rising sun. The squad stood frozen until the bird lifted off, its roar drowning out the valley's usual silence. Diaz was the first to speak. "What was that?" Reyes exhaled sharply. "That was a warning." Jenkins kicked at the dirt. "So what? We just pretend none of this is happening?" Cole watched the chopper shrink into the distance, his gut churning. Ellis hadn't just taken the journal, he'd taken their proof, their credibility. "No," Cole said quietly. "We don't pretend." He turned to face them, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We document everything, dates, times, details, but we keep it off the books. And we don't let them bury this." The men exchanged glances, then nodded. Reyes cracked his knuckles. "So where do we start?" Cole glanced at the tree line, where the shadows seemed to shift without wind. "We start by watching back." The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, skeletal shadows across the valley floor as the squad prepared for their second patrol. The men moved with stiff precision, checking gear and chambering rounds, but the usual banter was absent. The air was thick with unspoken tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. Jenkins adjusted his helmet, his fingers lingering on the strap a beat too long. His eyes kept flicking toward the ridgeline, searching for movement that wasn't there. Yet, Diaz noticed. "You good?" Jenkins forced a nod, just waiting for the other boot to drop. Diaz didn't laugh. None of them did. Sergeant Cole approached, his face unreadable. "Same route as last time. East Ridge, then loop back before dusk. Stay sharp, no surprises." The words rang hollow. There were always surprises in this valley. The squad moved out in staggered formation, rifles at the ready. The trail was narrow, forcing them into single file, the cliffs pressing in on either side. The silence was suffocating. No birds, no wind. Nend. Just the crunch of boots on dry earth and the occasional creak of gear. Then Jenkins saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of his vision, a shadow detaching itself from the rocks ahead. The watcher stood motionless, its hooded face turned toward the patrol. Moonlight glinted off the smooth, featureless surface beneath its cowl. Jenkins' breath hitched. "Sarge." Cole followed his gaze, but the figure was already gone. "What?" "Matt." Jenkins swallowed hard. "Nothing." thought I saw something." Diaz shot him a look but said nothing. The squad pressed on, their pace quickening. The return trip was worse. The men were jumpy, their heads swiveling at every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of stone. Jenkins could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes tracking their every step. The watcher was following, not hiding, not stalking, just observing. Then Reyes froze. "Where's Martinez?" The squad halted, turning in place. Martinez had been bringing up the rear, quiet, steady Martinez, who never wandered, never lagged. But now he was gone. Cole's voice was razor sharp. "When did you last see him?" Reyes shook his head. 2 minutes ago? Maybe less. He was right behind me." The squad doubled back, scanning the trail, the rocks, the scrub brush. No blood. No scuff marks. No sign of struggle. Just empty space where a man should have been. Jenkins' skin prickled. He didn't fall behind. I would have heard. Diaz's jaw tightened. "Then where is he?" Cole radioed the outpost, his voice clipped. "Kilo Actual, this is Cole. We've got a man missing. Martinez. Last seen near Grid Echo 7. Request immediate." "Immediate," static hissed back. Then, faint but unmistakable, a whisper. "Too late." Cole's grip on the handset turned white-knuckled. "Say again?" Silence. The squad exchanged glances, the unspoken truth settling over them like a shroud. Martinez was gone, and no one remembered him leaving. The outpost was a tomb when they returned. No Martinez, no sign he'd ever existed beyond the empty cot in the barracks and the untouched MRE on the supply table. Captain Vickers met them at the gate, his face unreadable. "Report." Cole's voice was steel. "Private Martinez went missing during patrol. No contact. No signs of engagement. Just gone." Vickers exhaled through his nose. "You searched?" "Yes, sir." And Cole met his eyes. "Nothing." Vickers nodded, as if this was expected. "I'll notify command. Until then, no more patrols. Not until we have answers." Jenkins bristled. "That's it. We're just gonna stand down," Private Vickers snapped. He turned to Cole, his voice dropping. "My tent. Now." The squad watched them go, the silence thick enough to choke on. Diaz lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "They're not even gonna look for him." Jenkins stared at the tree line, where the shadows stretched long in the fading light. The watcher stood there now, still as stone, its hooded face turned toward the outpost. Watching. Waiting. Jenkins didn't look away. Neither did it. The scream tore through the outpost just before dawn. Sergeant Cole was on his feet before his eyes fully opened, rifle in hand, adrenaline burning through his veins. The sound had been raw, guttural, not a call for help, but the dying wail of a man already broken. "Contact," Diaz shouted, already moving toward the perimeter. The rest of the squad scrambled after him, weapons raised, boots pounding against the hard-packed earth. Cole reached the sandbag wall first. The man lay sprawled in the dirt just beyond the wire, his uniform shredded and dark with blood. He wasn't Taliban, his fatigues were U.S. Army, but not their units. His face was a mess of dirt and crimson, one eye swollen shut, the other wide and rolling like a spooked horse's. "Jesus," Jenkins muttered, lowering his rifle. "He's one of ours." "Nay." Cole didn't hesitate. "Diaz, cover me. Reyes, get the med kit." He vaulted over the sandbags and dropped to the man's side. Up close, the damage was worse. Deep gashes raked across his chest, his fingers broken and twisted. His lips moved soundlessly, flecks of blood dotting his chin. Cole grabbed his shoulder. "Hey, stay with me. What unit are you?" The man's remaining eye locked onto Cole's face. His breath came in wet, shuddering gasps. "Bravo, Bravo Company, 3rd Platoon." Cole's blood ran cold. Bravo Company had been stationed at the next valley over 30 clicks away through Taliban-infested mountains. No way this guy had walked that distance in his condition. "How'd you get here?" Cole demanded. The man's fingers twitched, grasping at Cole's sleeve. His voice was a whisper, barely audible over the wind. "The thing in the robes." The words sent a chill down Cole's spine. He leaned closer. "What about it?" The man's throat worked, his breath rattling. "It took them. Took them all. Just left me to tell you." "Tell us what?" The man's eye widened further, his pupils dilating until the iris was nearly gone. His lips parted. A wet, choking sound escaped his throat. Then his body arched off the ground, his back bending at an impossible angle, as if something beneath his skin was trying to push its way out. Diaz cursed, stumbling back. "What on earth?" The man collapsed, his limbs splaying like a discarded puppet's. His chest didn't rise again. Silence. Then Reyes exhaled sharply. "He's gone." Cole didn't move. His gaze was locked on the man's dog tags, glinting dully in the pre-dawn light. He reached down, tugging them free. The name read, PFC Daniel Harker. Jenkins shifted behind him. What did he mean? The thing in the robes. Cole pocketed the tags, his jaw tight. You know damn well what he meant. Diaz swallowed hard. Bravo Company's gone? All of them? Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written in the blood at their feet, in the hollow terror in Harker's dead eye. The Watcher wasn't just watching anymore. It was hunting. And Bravo Company had been its latest meal. Captain Vickers took one look at the body and ordered it burned. No medevac? Cole asked, his voice carefully neutral. Vickers didn't meet his eyes. No point. And no use sending a chopper into hot air for a corpse. Cole clenched his fists. Sir, he said his entire unit was. I heard what he said, Sergeant. Vickers' voice was sharp. But until we have confirmation, we treat this as an isolated incident. Understood? Cole held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded stiffly. Understood. But as he walked away, Harker's final words echoed in his skull. It took them all. And Cole knew with a bone-deep certainty that confirmation would come soon. Because whatever had killed Bravo Company wasn't done. And their outpost was next. The package arrived with the morning supply drop. Cole hadn't ordered anything, hadn't received notice of incoming mail. Yet there it was, a small, nondescript cardboard box tucked between crates of Martinez and ammo, his name scrawled across the top in uneven block letters. No return address. No postmark. Diaz nudged it with his boot. Secret admirer? Cole crouched, turning the box over in his hands. It was light, too light to hold anything substantial. The tape sealing it was brittle, yellowed with age, as if it had been sitting in storage for years. Jenkins hovered at his shoulder. You gonna open it? Cole exhaled sharply and tore the tape free. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was a single dog tag. The metal was dull, scratched, the chain broken. Cole lifted it, his fingers brushing the engraved surface. Harris, James A. OPO's Army. Dried blood crusted the edges, flaking off as Cole turned it over. The squad went dead silent. Harris had been evacuated weeks ago, catatonic, whispering about the Watcher. Last they'd heard, he was stateside, undergoing psych eval. There was no way his tag should be here. Not like this. Reyes swallowed hard. That's not possible. Diaz reached out, then pulled his hand back. Is that his blood? Cole's voice was flat. Yeah. Jenkins took a step back, his face pale. Who sent this? Cole sifted through the newspaper, searching for a note, a clue, anything. His fingers caught on a slip of paper wedged at the bottom, a single scrap, torn from a larger page. 2 words, written in the same jagged script as his name on the box. You're next. The air left Cole's lungs. Around him, the squad tensed, their eyes darting to the tree line, the cliffs, the shadows between the tents. Diaz cursed under his breath. They're screwing with us. Has to be. Reyes shook his head. Who? The Taliban don't leave notes in English. And they sure don't have access to Harris's tags. Jenkins' hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. Unless it's not the Taliban. The unspoken truth settled over them like a shroud. Cole pocketed the tag, his jaw tight. Check the perimeter. Double the watch. No one moves alone. Diaz hesitated. You think it's here? Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The box was proof enough. The Watcher wasn't just watching. It was sending a message. And the squad was no longer the hunter. They were the hunted. The scream tore through the outpost like a blade. Cole jerked upright, his hand already closing around his rifle. The sound hadn't come from the perimeter, it had come from inside the wire. Contact. Diaz's voice was raw with panic. They're inside. They're really inside. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting up the night in staccato bursts. Shadows moved between the tents too fast, too fluid, flickering like candle flames in a draft. Cole burst out of his tent, rifle raised, scanning the chaos. Men scrambled in every direction, firing at shapes that dissolved into the dark before bullets could connect. Hold your fire. Cole bellowed. Hold your. Then he saw it. A shadow not cast, but alive detached itself from the side of the command tent. It stretched, elongated, then lunged at Private Reynolds, wrapping around him like smoke. Reynolds screamed, his voice cutting off mid-shriek as the shadow swallowed him whole. His body collapsed, limp, as the darkness slithered away, leaving no mark. Jenkins backed into Cole, his breath ragged. What is that? Day. Cole didn't have an answer. Another scream, this time from the watchtower. The soldier up there flailed as shadows coiled up the wooden beams, wrapping around his legs, his torso, his throat. His rifle clattered to the ground as he was yanked backward into the night. Fall back to the bunker. Cole grabbed Jenkins by the vest, shoving him toward the sandbag shelter at the center of the outpost. Move. The squad rallied, firing blindly into the dark as they retreated. Bullets did nothing. Grenades did nothing. The shadows moved through the explosions like they weren't even there. Then Cole saw him. The Watcher. It stood at the edge of the chaos, untouched, unmoved, its hooded face turned toward the slaughter. Its robes didn't ripple in the wind. Its feet didn't disturb the dust. It simply observed, as if drinking in the terror like wine. Cole raised his rifle, aiming squarely at its chest. The Watcher turned its head. For a heartbeat, their eyes met Cole's, burning with fury, the Watcher's hollow and endless. Cole pulled the trigger. The bullet passed through the Watcher as if it were made of mist, embedding itself in the dirt beyond. The watcher didn't flinch, didn't react. It simply tilted its head, as if amused by the attempt. Then it stepped forward, not toward Cole, but toward Jenkins, who was dragging a wounded Reyes toward the bunker. "Jenkins!" Cole roared. "Behind you!" Jenkins turned just as the watcher reached for him. Its hand, long, skeletal, the color of old bone, emerged from the sleeve of its robe, fingers stretching toward Jenkins' face. Jenkins froze, his eyes widening in pure, primal terror. Then Diaz barreled into him, knocking him aside. The watcher's fingers grazed Diaz's shoulder instead. Diaz gasped, his body locking up as if hit by 1,000 volts. His skin paled, his veins standing out black beneath the surface. His mouth opened. And the voice that came out wasn't his. It was layered, guttural, the sound of 100 whispers speaking as one. "You are seen." Then Diaz collapsed. The watcher withdrew its hand, its hood shifting as if surveying the carnage. The shadows around the outpost stilled, then slithered back into the darkness, leaving behind only the moans of the wounded and the stench of gunpowder. The watcher turned one last time to Cole and vanished. Not into the night, not into the trees, and into nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Cole knelt beside Diaz, rolling him onto his back. His skin was cold, his pulse thready, but he was alive. His lips moved, forming soundless words. Jenkins crouched next to them, his hands shaking. What on earth was that? What did it do to him? Cole didn't answer. He was staring at Diaz's shoulder, where the watcher had touched him. The fabric of his uniform was untouched. But beneath it, etched into his skin like a brand, was a single, stark symbol. An eye, unblinking, watching. Cole exhaled sharply. "We need to move. Now." Reyes groaned, clutching his bleeding leg. "Move where? That thing's everywhere." Cole hauled Diaz over his shoulder, his voice grim. "Anywhere but here." Because one thing was certain. The watcher hadn't just attacked them. It had marked them. And it wasn't done yet. The radio crackled with static, then died. Diaz slammed his palm against the side of the unit, but the screen remained dark. "Comms are fried. Not just us, everything. Sat phone's dead too." Jenkins felt the weight of the silence press down on him. No distant hum of generators, no chatter from other outposts. Just the oppressive stillness of the valley, as if the world beyond had ceased to exist. Captain Vickers emerged from his tent, his face drawn. "Get those comms back online, Corporal. Now." Diaz shot Cole a look. "Sir, it's not a technical issue. It's what, Diaz?" Vickers snapped. Jenkins clenched his fists. "It's them." Vickers turned on him, his eyes sharp. "Them." "The Watchers," Jenkins said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "They're cutting us off." Vickers' jaw tightened. "Enough of this nonsense. Sergeant Cole, lock this outpost down. No one in or out until comms are restored." Cole nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." As Vickers stormed back to his tent, Reyes leaned in, his voice low. "You think he's starting to believe us?" Cole watched the captain go, his expression unreadable. "Doesn't matter. We're on our own now." The lockdown was swift. Sandbags reinforced the gates, extra men were posted at the perimeter, and every weapon was loaded and ready. But the real enemy wasn't outside the wire. It was already inside. Jenkins felt at first a whisper against the back of his neck, so faint he thought he'd imagined it. Then it came again, clearer this time, a voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "You are seen." He whirled, rifle raised, but the space behind him was empty. The whisper slithered into his ear again, closer now, as if the speaker stood inches away. "You cannot hide." Jenkins' breath hitched. "You hear that?" Diaz, standing guard beside him, frowned. "Hear what?" Jenkins opened his mouth, then froze. The whisper wasn't coming from outside. It was inside his head. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The Watcher wasn't just watching. It was speaking to him. Cole found Jenkins minutes later, slumped against the sandbags, his hands pressed to his temples. Jenkins looked up, his eyes hollow. "It's talking to me, Sarge." Cole knelt beside him. "What did it say?" Jenkins swallowed hard. "That it sees me. That it knows me." He hesitated, then whispered. "It said, it's coming for us. All of us." Cole's grip tightened on his rifle. Around them, the outpost buzzed with tense activity, men moving with the frantic energy of trapped animals. But the air itself felt wrong, thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Then the lights went out. Not just the generators. The flashlights, the glow sticks. Every source of illumination winked out at once, plunging the outpost into absolute darkness. Someone shouted, boots scuffled, a magazine clicked into place. Cole's voice cut through the black. "Hold position. Do not fire. Silence." "Yes." Then, from the heart of the outpost, a single sound. A footstep. Not human, not boot on dirt. Something heavier. Something older. Way. Jenkins' blood turned to ice. "It's here." The darkness shifted. And then the screaming started. The Co's tent was empty. Cole waited until the last of the patrol had left the outpost before slipping inside, his gloved hands steady despite the adrenaline humming through his veins. The flap closed behind him with a whisper, sealing him in near darkness. Moonlight filtered through the canvas, painting the interior in jagged silver stripes. Captain Vickers' desk was a mess of maps, reports, and half-empty coffee cups. Cole ignored them, moving straight for the footlocker tucked beneath the cot, the one Vickers always kept locked. Cole had watched him open it a dozen times, knew the combination by heart. 18742. The latch clicked. Inside, nestled beneath a stack of requisition forms, was a slim manila folder stamped with a single word. Classified. Cole's pulse spiked. He flipped it open. The first page was a mission report dated 6 months prior another unit's deployment to the Coringal. The details were sparse, redacted in thick black ink, but the conclusion was clear. Incident at Grid Echo 7 resulted in multiple Kia. Survivors reported hostile contact with unidentified entity. Recommend immediate suppression of all related intel. Cole's fingers trembled as he turned the page. More reports, more redactions, and then a photograph. The image was grainy, taken at night, but the figure in the center was unmistakable. The Watcher. No Watcher. It stood at the edge of a firefight, its hooded form untouched by the chaos around it. The soldiers in the frame didn't seem to notice it. Their rifles were trained on the trees, their faces contorted in panic. But the Watcher wasn't looking at them. It was looking at the camera, as if it knew it was being photographed. Cole's breath caught. He flipped to the next page, a handwritten note, barely legible. Subject exhibits capabilities beyond known parameters. Does not engage. Does not retreat. Only observes. Survivors describe auditory hallucinations prior to disappearance. Recommend disengagement protocol for all future patrols in sector. The note was signed by Captain Ellis. Cole's stomach twisted. Ellis hadn't come to investigate them. He'd come to cover up what had happened to the unit before them. And the one before that. The file's final page was a list of named soldiers from half a dozen units, all marked with the same designation. MI a presumed KIA. Harris's name was there. So was Martinez's. Cole's vision blurred. The military knew. They knew about the Watcher. They knew it was hunting them. And they'd sent men into the valley anyway. 1. A floorboard creaked outside the tent. Cole snapped the folder shut, sliding it back into the footlocker just as the flap opened behind him. Captain Vickers stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the moon. His expression was unreadable. "Find what you were looking for, Sergeant." Cole straightened, his mind racing. "Sir, I..." Vickers stepped inside, letting the flap fall shut. "Save it. I knew you'd come." Cole's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Vickers noticed. He didn't reach for his own weapon. Just sighed, rubbing his temples. "You think I want this? You think I enjoy sending men to die?" Cole's voice was steel. "You knew what was out here." "Of course I knew." Vickers' eyes were hollow. "But orders are orders. This valley, it's a black hole. Things go in. They don't come out." He gestured to the footlocker. "You saw the files. You know what happens to the ones who talk." Cole's jaw tightened. "Harris. Martinez." Vickers nodded. "And the ones before them." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But you're different. You've seen it, and you're still standing." Cole didn't flinch. "What do you want?" Vickers held out a hand. "The tags." Cole hesitated, then pulled Harris's dog tags from his pocket. Vickers took them, his fingers brushing the blood-stained metal. "They'll come for you next. You know that, right?" Cole met his gaze. "Let them try." For the first time, Vickers almost smiled. "That's what I thought you'd say." He turned, pausing at the tent flap. "Burn the files." "And Cole?" "Yeah? Don't be here when the sun comes up." Then he was gone. Cole exhaled sharply, his mind racing. The squad had minutes, maybe less, before the Watcher made its move. But now, for the first time, they had something more valuable than bullets. They had the truth. And Cole intended to use it. Reyes had been quiet all night. Too quiet. Jenkins noticed it first, the way Reyes' fingers twitched against his rifle, the way his eyes darted to the tree line every few seconds, but as if expecting something to lunge from the dark. The rest of the squad had settled into a tense silence, their backs pressed against the sandbags, their weapons cradled in their laps. The outpost was a graveyard, the only sound the occasional whisper of wind through the razor wire. Then Reyes snapped. One moment, he was crouched beside Diaz, his breath steady. The next, he was on his feet, rifle raised, screaming into the void. "I see you." The squad jerked back as Reyes unloaded a full magazine into the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up his face, wild-eyed and sweat-slick, his teeth bared in a snarl. Bullets chewed into the dirt, the trees, the empty air hitting nothing. "Come on, you bastard. Show yourself." Diaz lunged for him, tackling him to the ground before he could reload. Reyes thrashed like a wild animal, his fingers clawing at Diaz's arms. "Get off me. It's inside my head." Cole was on him in seconds, pinning his shoulders while Jenkins wrestled the rifle away. Reyes' screams turned ragged, his voice breaking as he arched against their grip. "It's talking to me. It won't stop. It won't stop." His eyes rolled back, showing too much white, his pupils dilated to black pits. Spittle flecked his lips as his body convulsed, his spine bowing off the ground like something was trying to crawl out of his skin. Jenkins recoiled. What on earth's wrong with him? Cole didn't answer. He grabbed Reyes' face, forcing him to hold still. "Reyes, look at me." For a heartbeat, Reyes' gaze locked onto Cole's, clear, lucid, terrified. His lips trembled. "Sarge, it's learning us." Then his body went rigid. His mouth stretched wide, wider than humanly possible, and a sound tore from his throat that wasn't his own, a guttural, layered voice, the same one that had spoken through Diaz. "You are seen." The words reverberated through the outpost, shaking the sandbags, rattling the ammo crates. The squad froze, their blood turning to ice. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the fit ended. Reyes collapsed, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His eyes fluttered shut. Silence. Diaz exhaled shakily. "Is he?" Cole pressed 2 fingers to Reyes' neck. The pulse was there, but weak. Alive. For now. Jenkins swallowed hard. What on earth was that? Cole didn't look up. The Watcher. It's not just watching anymore. He peeled back Reyes' sleeve, revealing the same symbol that had been burned into Diaz's skin and eye, stark and unblinking. "It's getting inside us." The squad stared at the mark, their faces pale. Diaz clenched his fists. "So what do we do?" Cole's voice was grim. "We run. Vickers gave us a warning. The Watcher's coming for us tonight, and we can't fight what we don't understand." Cole hauled Reyes over his shoulder, his jaw set. "We move. Now. Before it takes the rest of us." The squad exchanged glances. No one argued. Because one thing was clear. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were prey. And the hunt had already begun. The outpost gates rattled first. No wind. No impact. Just the iron bars trembling like something unseen was testing their strength. Jenkins tightened his grip on his rifle, his knuckles white. The squad had formed a loose semicircle behind the sandbags, their weapons trained on the entrance. Cole stood at the center, his face a mask of grim determination. "Steady," Cole muttered. "Wait for my signal." The rattling stopped. Silence. Then the gates bent. Metal groaned as invisible force wrenched them inward, hinges screaming. The lock snapped, and the gate swung open, revealing the empty darkness beyond. Jenkins' breath hitched. "Where is it?" Diaz, still pale from the Watcher's touch, swallowed hard. "It's here. I can feel it." The air thickened, pressing against Jenkins' skin like a physical weight. The temperature dropped, his breath fogging in front of his face, despite the Afghan heat. Then a shadow detached itself from the night. The Watcher stepped into the outpost, its robed form untouched by the moonlight. Its hooded face turned slowly, surveying the men before it. The space beneath its cowl was empty, no eyes, no mouth, just a void that made Jenkins' stomach twist. Cole didn't hesitate. Fire. The squad opened up. Bullets tore through the Watcher's robes, punching holes in the fabric, but where they struck, there was no blood, no flesh, just more darkness. The Watcher didn't flinch, didn't stagger. It simply stood there, absorbing the barrage as if the rounds were nothing more than raindrops. Jenkins' magazine ran dry. He fumbled for another, his hands shaking. The watcher raised a hand long, skeletal fingers emerging from its sleeve, and pointed at Jenkins. A jolt of ice shot down his spine. His vision blurred. Pressure built behind his eyes, sharp and insistent, like nails being driven into his skull. Then the pain exploded. Jenkins screamed, dropping his rifle as blood welled in his tear ducts, streaming down his cheeks in crimson rivulets. His knees hit the dirt, his hands clawing at his face as the pressure intensified, as if something inside his skull was trying to push its way out. Jenkins. Diaz lunged for him, but Cole yanked him back. "Don't touch him," Cole barked. "It's in him." Jenkins' screams turned guttural, his body convulsing, his back arched, his spine bending at an unnatural angle. His mouth stretched wide, too wide, and the voice that tore free wasn't his. "You are seen, mate." The words reverberated through the outpost, shaking the ground, rattling the sandbags. The remaining soldiers staggered back, their weapons lowering in shock. The watcher stepped forward, its robes whispering against the dirt. Cole raised his rifle again, his voice raw. "Fall back. Now." But it was too late. The watcher's hand swept out, and the shadows around the outpost moved coiling like serpents, slithering toward the men. They wrapped around legs, torsos, throats, dragging soldiers into the dark. Screams filled the air, cut short, as the shadows swallowed them whole. Diaz fired his last rounds, his face a mask of defiance. "Come on, you bastard. Take me." The watcher turned its hooded face toward him. And then a gunshot. Not from the squad. From the command tent. Captain Vickers stood in the doorway, his sidearm raised, smoke curling from the barrel. His expression was hollow, resigned. The bullet struck the watcher's chest, and this time, it flinched. For the first time, it reacted. The shadows recoiled, the pressure in Jenkins' skull easing slightly as the watcher turned toward Vickers. Cole didn't waste the opening. "Go, move." Diaz grabbed Jenkins, hauling him up as the squad broke for the rear gate. Cole covered their retreat, firing blindly into the dark. Vickers met Cole's eyes for a split second, then turned and walked toward the watcher, his gun still raised. "Come on," Vickers snarled. "Let's finish this." "Nah." The watcher's robes billowed as it advanced. Cole didn't stay to watch. He ran. The last thing he heard before the night swallowed the outpost whole was Vickers' final, defiant shout. And then silence. Absolute. Eternal. The squad didn't stop running until the outpost was a distant smear of darkness behind them. Jenkins stumbled, his face streaked with blood, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Diaz looked back, his expression haunted. "They're gone. All of them." Cole didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the horizon, where the first hints of dawn painted the sky gray. The watcher had won this battle. But the war wasn't over yet. Not while Cole still drew breath. He adjusted his grip on his rifle and turned toward the mountains. "Then we make sure they didn't die for nothing." The radio crackled to life, just as the first light of dawn bled over the mountains. Cole snatched the handset, his fingers stiff with cold and exhaustion. "This is Sergeant Cole, Outpost Kilo. Identify." "Bay." The voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. "Bravo 7, this is High Command. Immediate evacuation order in effect. Extraction team en route to your location. ETA 15 minutes. Do you copy?" Cole exchanged glances with Diaz and Jenkins. The three of them stood at the edge of a narrow ravine, their uniforms torn, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. Behind them, Reyes lay unconscious on a makeshift stretcher, his breathing shallow, the watcher's mark still stark on his forearm. "Copy," Cole said. "We have wounded. One critical." "Understood. Medical team will be on site. Hold position until extraction." The transmission cut out. Jenkins wiped his face with a shaking hand. "They're pulling us out." "Just like that?" Diaz let out a hollow laugh. "After last night, you think they want us sticking around to talk?" Cole clenched his jaw. The squad had barely escaped with their lives. The outpost was gone, swallowed by whatever darkness the Watcher commanded. And now High Command was scrambling to cover it up. He looked down at Reyes. The man's eyelids fluttered, his lips moving soundlessly. The Watcher's voice still echoed in his skull. Cole was sure of it. "Help me with him," Cole said, bending to grab one end of the stretcher. Diaz took the other, and together they hauled Reyes toward the coordinates the radio operator had specified, a rocky clearing just beyond the ravine, where a chopper could land without drawing attention. Jenkins trailed behind, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his head swiveling constantly. "You think it's still following us?" Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The weight in the air, the unnatural silence of the valley, it all screamed one truth. They were being watched. The chopper arrived right on schedule, its rotors kicking up a storm of dust and loose rock. Cole shielded his eyes as the bird touched down, its side door sliding open to reveal a medic and two armed escorts. The medic jumped out first, rushing toward Reyes. What happened to him? "Me. Psychotic break." Cole lied smoothly, started screaming about things in the dark. "Collapsed after we got him out." The medic frowned but didn't argue. He signaled the escorts, who helped lift Reyes into the chopper. Diaz climbed in next, then turned to offer Jenkins a hand. Jenkins hesitated. His gaze flicked past Cole toward the tree line. His breath hitched. Cole didn't turn. He didn't need to. He knew what Jenkins saw. The Watcher, standing just beyond the trees, watching, waiting. "Jenkins," Cole said sharply. "Get in the bird." Jenkins didn't move. His hands trembled. "It's not letting me leave." Diaz grabbed his vest, yanking him forward. "No, it's not. Move." Jenkins stumbled, his boots scraping against the rock. He looked back once more, then froze. His voice was barely a whisper. "It's saying my name." Cole's blood turned to ice. "Jenkins." The chopper's engine whined, the pilot shouting over the roar. "Last call. We're wheels up in 30. Cole grabbed Jenkins' arm, hauling him toward the door. "Don't look at it. Don't listen to it." Jenkins' eyes were wide, unfocused. "It's in my head, Sarge. It's..." The chopper lurched, its rotors spinning faster. The escorts reached for Jenkins, pulling him inside. Cole jumped in after him, slamming the door shut as the bird lifted off. For a heartbeat, Jenkins seemed to snap back to himself. He pressed his hands against the window, his breath fogging the glass as the valley shrank beneath them. Then his body locked up. His back arched, his spine bending at an unnatural angle, his mouth stretched open. And the voice that tore free wasn't his. "You are seen." The escorts recoiled. The medic lunged for a sedative. But Cole was faster. He slammed the butt of his rifle into Jenkins' temple. Jenkins crumpled, unconscious before he hit the floor. Silence. Diaz stared at Cole, his face pale. What on earth was that? Cole didn't answer. He looked out the window, down at the valley below. The watcher stood in the clearing now, its hooded face tilted toward the rising sun. And then, as the chopper banked sharply, it was gone. The debriefing was a blur. High command took their statements in a sterile room with no windows, their questions sharp, their expressions unreadable. Cole stuck to the script: insurgent attack, structural collapse, casualties in the chaos. He mentioned nothing about the shadows. Nothing about the watcher. And they didn't ask. Reyes was shipped to a stateside hospital, sedated and strapped to a gurney. Jenkins was listed as Mia left behind in the confusion, though Cole knew the truth. Jenkins had never made it off that chopper. Not really. And Diaz was silent the whole flight home, his fingers tracing the mark on his shoulder, the eye that never blinked. And Cole stared out the window, watching the clouds swallow the mountains whole. The valley was quiet now, but it wasn't done with them. And Cole would be damned if he let it take anyone else. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering in the sterile interrogation room. Cole sat rigid in the metal chair, his fingers laced together on the table. Across from him, a stone-faced officer in pressed fatigues, Colonel Haskins, flipped through a file, his expression unreadable. "Sergeant Cole," Haskins said finally, his voice flat. "You and Corporal Reyes are the only survivors of Outpost Kilo. That's quite the distinction." Cole kept his face neutral. "We were lucky, sir." Haskins' lips thinned. "Luck doesn't explain how an entire outpost disappears overnight. No bodies. No signs of engagement. Just gone." He tapped the file. "Your initial report mentions an insurgent attack. Yet satellite imagery shows no enemy movement in the area. No IDs. No mortar fire." He leaned forward. "So tell me, Sergeant, what really happened out there?" Cole met his gaze. "We were overrun. Could have been Taliban. Could have been local militia. It was dark. Chaos." Haskins exhaled sharply through his nose. "And the missing men? Private Jenkins? Captain Vickers?" "Bar." Cole's jaw tightened. "Dead." "You're certain?" "I watched them die." Haskins studied him for a long moment, then closed the file. "You're a good soldier, Cole. But this story has holes. Balan, Ilandi. And I don't like holes." Cole didn't blink. "With all due respect, sir, I don't like losing men." The colonel's expression darkened. He pushed back from the table and stood. "Debriefing's over. You're dismissed." Cole stood, saluted, and turned for the door. Haskins' voice stopped him. "One more thing." Cole glanced back. The colonel's eyes were cold. "Your files are sealed. This conversation never happened. And if I hear one word about whispers or figures in the dark, I'll have you and Reyes shipped to a psych ward so fast your heads will spin. Understood?" Cole held his gaze. "Crystal, sir." He stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind him. Reyes leaned against the opposite wall, his arms crossed, his face pale beneath the harsh lights. A fresh bandage peeked out from beneath his sleeve, covering the watcher's mark. "They get to you too," Cole muttered. Reyes nodded, his voice low. "Told me it was combat stress. That I imagined it all." He rubbed his temple, his fingers trembling slightly. "They're burying it, Sarge." Cole glanced at the security camera in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. "Watching." "Yeah," he said quietly. "But we're not done." The watcher waited. And Cole intended to find it. Months had passed since the Coringal. Cole sat in the back of the Humvee, his fingers tracing the fresh orders crumpled in his hand. The ink was barely dry, the words still sharp in his mind. Reassignment to Forward Operating Base Coringal. Immediate deployment. The irony wasn't lost on him. After everything, the debriefings, the psych evolves, the hushed whispers of combat fatigue, they were sending him back. The Humvee jolted over a rut in the road, snapping Cole out of his thoughts. The driver, a fresh-faced private who couldn't have been older than 20, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You been here before, Sarge?" Cole exhaled through his nose. "Yeah." The private nodded, oblivious to the weight in that word. "Heard it's quiet now." Taliban pulled back after the last push. Cole didn't answer. He stared out the window as the valley unfolded around them, the same jagged cliffs, the same skeletal trees, the same suffocating silence. Nothing had changed. Mess. And yet, everything had. The outpost was a ghost town. Sandbags sagged, their seams split by time and neglect. The command tent listed to one side, its canvas flapping in the wind like a dying breath. The only signs of life were the fresh boot prints in the dirt, too many to belong to a single patrol, too few to be a full unit. Cole stepped through the broken gate, his rifle slung over his shoulder. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like old blood. "Place gives me the creeps," the private muttered, shifting his weight behind him. Cole ignored him. His eyes were locked on the center of the outpost, where a single dog tag lay in the dirt, glinting in the afternoon sun. He knelt, brushing the dust away. The name etched into the metal made his stomach drop. Jenkins, Michael R. Jenkins tags. But Jenkins had never made it out of the valley. Cole's fingers tightened around the metal. The chain was broken, the edges frayed, not cut, but worn, as if it had been torn free in a struggle. And beside it, half buried in the dirt, were footprints, fresh, leading straight into the cliffs. The private hovered at his shoulder. "You okay, Sarge?" Cole stood, slipping the tags into his pocket. Radio command. "Tell them we're investigating possible insurgent activity." The private blinked. "What insurgents? There's no one here." Cole adjusted his grip on his rifle, his gaze fixed on the tree line. The shadows between the trees seemed deeper now, thicker, as if something lurked just beyond sight. "That's what they want you to think." The wind picked up, carrying a whisper not from the trees, not from the radio, but from the earth itself. A voice Cole had hoped never to hear again. "Welcome back. Welcome back." Cole didn't flinch. He turned toward the cliffs, his jaw set. The Watcher was waiting. And this time, Cole wasn't running. The footprints led Cole deeper into the valley, winding through jagged rock formations and gnarled trees that clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder with each step, his breath curling in front of him despite the midday sun. The private had stayed behind at the outpost Cole had ordered him to, though the kid hadn't needed much convincing. Good. This wasn't a fight for the uninitiated. The tracks ended abruptly at the mouth of a narrow cave, its entrance half hidden by a tangle of thorny brush. The darkness inside was absolute, swallowing the light whole. Cole hesitated, his fingers tightening around his rifle. Then the voice came. Not from the cave. Not from the wind, from inside his skull. Cole. His blood turned to ice. He knew that voice, layered, guttural, the sound of 100 whispers speaking as one. The Watcher. Cole stepped forward, his boots crunching on loose shale. "Show yourself." "Nah." Silence. Then movement. A figure emerged from the cave's mouth, its robes rippling like smoke despite the still air. The Watcher stood before him, its hooded face tilted slightly, as if studying him. Moonlight glinted off the smooth, featureless surface beneath its cowl. No eyes, no mouth, just an abyss that made Cole's stomach twist. "You came back, Mick." The words vibrated through Cole's bones, resonating in his chest like a struck drum. He forced himself to meet the Watcher's gaze, if it could be called that. "Yeah," Cole said, his voice steady. "I came back." The Watcher didn't move, didn't breathe. It simply was an immovable presence, ancient and hungry. "Why?" Cole exhaled sharply. "You took my men. You took Jenkins." A pause. Then, almost amused, they were seen. Cole's finger twitched against the trigger. "Nonsense. You marked them. You hunted them." The Watcher tilted its head. "And you?" Cole didn't answer. The Watcher stepped closer, its robes whispering against the stone. "You were seen too, Sergeant. Yet here you stand." Cole raised his rifle. Not for long, he fired. 3 rounds punched through the Watcher's chest, or where its chest should have been. The bullets passed through like mist, embedding themselves in the rock behind it. The Watcher didn't flinch, didn't stagger. It simply watched. Cole ejected the spent magazine, slamming in a fresh one. "What on earth are you?" The Watcher extended a hand, long, skeletal fingers emerging from its sleeve. The air around it warped, shadows coiling like living things. "Older than your wars. Older than your kind." Cole's pulse hammered in his throat. "Why this valley? Why us?" The Watcher's fingers curled slightly, as if plucking an invisible thread. "You were loud. You were bright. You were interesting." A chill spider walked down Cole's spine. They hadn't been hunted. They'd been observed. Like ants under a magnifying glass. Cole tightened his grip on his rifle. "Where's Jenkins?" The Watcher didn't answer. Cole took another step forward, his voice raw. "Where is he?" The Watcher's hood shifted slightly. Then, in a movement too fast to track, it lunged. Cole barely had time to react before the Watcher's hand closed around his throat. Not flesh, not bone, but something else, something cold and unyielding. His vision blurred, his lungs burning as the pressure intensified. The Watcher leaned in, its hood brushing his forehead. And then Cole saw. Not the cave, not the valley, everything. Mate. 1,000 battlefields. 1,000 wars. Soldiers screaming in languages long dead. Shadows moving where no shadows should be. And beneath it all a presence, vast and patient, watching from the dark. The Watcher wasn't a creature. Not seen. Eyes. Mere wise. It was a force. And it had been here long before men carved their names into the earth. The vision shattered as the Watcher released him. Cole collapsed to his knees, gasping, his throat on fire. The Watcher loomed over him, its voice softer now, almost mournful. "You are seen, Cole. But you are not taken. Why?" "Why?" Cole coughed, his hands braced against the stone. "Maybe I'm just stubborn." A pause. Then, for the first time, something like amusement colored the Watcher's tone. "Perhaps." It stepped back, its robes billowing in a wind that didn't exist. "Go. Tell them what you have seen." Cole looked up, his vision swimming. "They won't believe me." The Watcher tilted its head. "No, but they will fear." Then it was gone, not fading, not retreating, but simply ceasing to be, as if it had never been there at all. Cole stayed on his knees for a long moment, his breath ragged, his mind reeling. The cave mouth yawned before him, dark and silent. Jenkins wasn't here. None of them were. They were somewhere else, somewhere older. Cole pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling. The sun had dipped behind the mountains, painting the valley in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackled to life, the private, calling for him. Cole didn't answer. He turned his back on the cave and walked toward the fading light. The watcher had spoken, and Cole, against all odds, had lived to tell the tale. But the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The radio crackled to life for the first time in hours, static hissing through the outpost like a dying breath. Cole grabbed the handset, his fingers stiff with tension. Kilo Actual, this is Cole. Do you copy? Silence. Then a scream. Not a shout of pain, not a cry for help, a raw, guttural sound that tore through the speaker and lodged in Cole's chest like a knife. It was his own voice, warped and distant, as if echoing across years rather than miles. Cole. Diaz lunged for the radio, his face pale. Cole, respond. The scream cut off abruptly. Dead air. Then, faint but unmistakable, a whisper. Found you. The transmission died. The squad stood frozen, the silence thicker than blood. Jenkins was the first to speak, his voice hoarse. What on earth was that? Cole didn't answer. He was already moving, grabbing his rifle and shoving fresh mags into his vest. Diaz, with me. Reyes, hold the fort. Reyes caught his arm. You can't go out there. Not after. Cole yanked free. That was my voice. My scream. You think I'm just gonna sit here? No one argued. The valley was a graveyard at dusk. Cole and Diaz moved in silence, their boots barely disturbing the dust. The path to the last known coordinates was etched into Cole's memory past the dry river, through the narrow pass, up the eastern ridge where the rocks bled rust red. Diaz's breath hitched. You see that? Cole followed his gaze. The rifle lay in the dirt, its barrel twisted, its stock splintered, as if crushed by an immense weight. Cole's stomach dropped. It was his, but not as it should be. The metal was pitted with rust, the serial number barely legible beneath decades of corrosion. The sling was brittle, disintegrating at the slightest touch. Diaz swallowed hard. That's not possible. You were just holding this an hour ago. Cole crouched, brushing his fingers over the rusted metal. The rifle was cold, too cold, as if it had been lying in permafrost instead of desert heat. Then he saw the footprints. Not boot prints. Not human. Three-toed, elongated, pressed deep into the stone, as if the rock itself had softened beneath the weight. They led away from the rifle, vanishing into the cliffs. Cole stood, his pulse hammering. We're not alone. Diaz raised his weapon, scanning the shadows. Where did it take you? A whisper slithered through the rocks, too close, too intimate. Closer than you think. Diaz spun, firing blindly into the dark. The shots echoed, but the whisper only laughed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone. Cole grabbed Diaz's shoulder. Move, and now. They ran. The outpost lights were a distant glow when the ground shook. Not an explosion, something deeper. Something older. As if the valley itself had taken a breath. Cole risked a glance back. The watcher stood atop the ridge, its robes billowing in a wind that didn't touch the trees. Its hooded face was turned toward them, its presence pressing against Cole's skull like a physical weight. Then it raised a hand. And the world bent. Cole's vision blurred, his stomach lurching as the path ahead stretched, twisted, folded in on itself. The outpost lights winked out. The stars above smeared across the sky like paint. Diaz gasped, stumbling. What was that? The watcher's voice echoed, not from the ridge, but from inside Cole's mind. Time is not what you think. When? Then the ground gave way. Cole fell not down. Through. He woke in the dirt. Alone. The sky was wrong, the stars too bright, the moon too large, its craters staring down like unblinking eyes. The air tasted metallic, thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something rotten. Cole pushed himself up, his joints aching. His rifle was gone. His vest was torn. His dog tags were cold against his chest, the metal frosted over despite the heat. Then he saw it. The outpost. Or what was left of it. The sandbags had crumbled to dust. The command tent was a skeletal frame, its canvas long since rotted away. The American flag still stood, its colors bleached white, its edges fluttering like a ghost shroud. And at the center of it all, etched into the hard-packed earth, was a single word. Gone. Cole's breath hitched. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. He turned. Me. The watcher stood inches away, its robes brushing his boots. Its hooded face tilted, the void beneath its cowl deeper than the night sky. You are seen, it whispered. Cole lunged and the world shattered. Diaz found him at dawn. Cole was kneeling in the dirt, his hands empty, his eyes fixed on the horizon. His rifle lay beside him, rusted beyond recognition. Diaz dropped to his knees. Jesus, Cole, where did you go? Cole didn't answer. His lips were cracked, his voice raw, as if he'd been screaming for hours. When he finally spoke, the words sent a chill down Diaz's spine. It's not just watching anymore. He turned, his eyes hollow. It's collecting. And in the distance, the wind carried a whisper. Always watching. The valley held its breath. And the squad knew. Cole had come back. But not all of him. The Pentagon press release was crisp, sterile, and utterly devoid of truth. The Department of Defense regrets to announce the deaths of Sergeant Daniel Cole and Private Michael Jenkins, who were killed in action during a Taliban ambush in the Korengal Valley. Their bravery and sacrifice will not be forgotten. Reyes crumpled the newspaper in his fist, the ink smearing against his sweat-damp palm. The hospital room around him was too bright, too clean, a stark contrast to the blood and shadows still painted behind his eyelids. The TV in the corner played the same muted footage, flag-draped coffins, a somber-faced general, a grieving family that wasn't Jenkins. Lies. He'd tried to tell them. After the discharge papers, after the psych evaluations, after the way the officer's eyes glazed over whenever he mentioned the watcher, he'd still tried. No one listened. A nurse paused in the doorway, her smile brittle. You have a visitor, Corporal? Reyes didn't look up. Tell them to back off. Charming as ever, Reyes. Diaz. Reyes finally lifted his head. Diaz stood just outside the door, his uniform replaced by civvies, his left arm in a sling. The mark on his shoulder, the watcher's eye, was hidden beneath layers of fabric, but Reyes knew it was there. He could feel it, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The nurse left with a disapproving click of her heels. Diaz shut the door behind her. You see the news? Reyes rasped, tossing the crumpled paper at him. Diaz caught it one-handed. Yeah, nonsense, right? Cole's not dead. We know that. Try telling command. Reyes rubbed his temples, the whispers at the edge of his hearing swelling for a moment before receding. They've got Jenkins' tags. They've got Cole's rifle. Far as they're concerned, that's case closed. Diaz sat on the edge of the bed, his voice dropping. And what do you think? Reyes hesitated. The last thing he remembered before waking up in Bagram was the Watcher's voice in his skull, the way his bones had vibrated with its words. Cole had been there, or at least, he thought so. The memories were fractured, half-dreamt. I think Cole's still in that valley, Reyes muttered. And I think whatever took him isn't done yet. Diaz exhaled sharply. So what do we do? Reyes reached under his pillow and pulled out a dog tag not his own. The metal was cold, the chain broken. Cole. Daniel A. I found this in my gear when I woke up, Reyes said. No way it got there on its own. Diaz's jaw tightened. It's messing with us. Yeah. Or it's a message. Reyes clenched the tag in his fist. Either way, I'm not letting them bury this. Diaz studied him for a long moment, then nodded. They'll call you crazy, you know. Conspiracy nut. PTSD case. Reyes smirked, though there was no humor in it. What's new? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane. For a heartbeat, the shadows in the corner of the room seemed to deepen, to stretch. Then the fluorescent lights buzzed back to full brightness. Diaz didn't flinch. You hear from Reyes' family? Reyes shook his head. His mom bought the official story. They're having a funeral next week. Closed casket. I bet. Of course. Reyes pocketed the tag, his fingers brushing the bandage on his forearm. The eye beneath it burned. You sticking around? Diaz stood, adjusting his sling. Not here, but I'm not done either. Reyes didn't ask what he meant. He didn't need to. The truth was out there, buried beneath redacted files and flag-draped lies, waiting in the dark corners of the world where the Watcher's gaze still lingered. And one way or another, they'd drag it into the light. Even if no one believed them. Even if it killed them. Diaz paused at the door. Watch your back, Reyes. Reyes leaned back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. The whispers surged again, just for a moment. You are seen. He smiled grimly. Yeah, I know. The door clicked shut. Outside, the world moved on, oblivious to the shadows gathering at its edges. But Reyes remembered. And that was enough. Years later, a new squad arrived in the Coringal. The Chinook's rotors thundered as it descended, kicking up dust that swirled like ghosts in the fading light. 10 soldiers disembarked, their boots sinking into the same dry earth that had swallowed so many before them. Welcome, gentlemen, muttered Corporal Reyes, adjusting his helmet as he scanned the valley. Private Lawson, the youngest of the group, squinted at the cliffs. Place looks dead already. Sergeant Vance, the squad leader, didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the ridgeline, where the setting sun painted the rocks in blood-red hues. Something about the stillness here set his teeth on edge. No birds, no wind. Just silence, thick and suffocating. The outpost was a skeleton of its former self, sandbags sagging, wooden beams bleached white by the sun, the remnants of old fire pits long gone cold. The previous unit had left no traces, no notes, no signs of their presence beyond the occasional spent shell casing half buried in the dirt. Cheery place, Lawson muttered, nudging a rusted ammo box with his boot. Reyes smirked. Wait till nightfall, real charm comes out then. Night came fast, swallowing the valley whole. Lawson drew first watch, his back against the sandbags, his rifle cradled in his lap. The others had turned in, their snores barely audible over the hum of the generator. The moon was a sliver overhead, casting just enough light to see the tree line, but nothing beyond. Then he saw it. A figure stood atop the cliffs, motionless against the starless sky. Robed, hooded, its outline too sharp, too still, like a statue carved from the darkness itself. Lawson's breath hitched. He blinked once, twice, but the figure remained. "Hayes," he whispered, nudging the corporal beside him. "You see that?" Hayes squinted, following Lawson's gaze. "See what?" Lawson turned back. The cliffs were empty. "Nothing," he muttered, shaking his head. "Just tired. Mares." But the dread didn't leave. It coiled in his gut like a snake, cold and heavy. He had seen it. He was sure of it. The wind picked up, carrying a whisper not from the trees, not from the radio, but from the earth itself. A voice that wasn't a voice, a sound that wasn't a sound. "You are seen." Lawson's blood turned to ice. He didn't sleep that night. And as dawn broke, painting the valley in pale gold, the figure was still there watching, waiting. Unseen by all but him.